For centuries, there's one period in India's history that gets all the attention: the time of the Gupta Empire. You've probably heard it called India's Golden Age, a time of just incredible achievement in science, art, and culture. But what does that label really mean? And, does it even tell the whole story? To figure that out, we kind of have to look at how this whole idea of a golden age even started.
So, yeah, that's the big question we're tackling today. How did this one specific era, from the 4th to the 6th century, get this amazing reputation? Well, the answer, as it turns out, has as much to do with how history gets told as what actually happened back then.
You see, the term Golden Age actually became popular way, way later. When the British were ruling India, they often justified it by saying India was backward or uncivilized. So Indian nationalist historians fought back. They pointed to the Gupta era and said, look, here is absolute proof of a brilliant, sophisticated, and advanced civilization that existed long before you ever showed up.
Okay, so where did this incredible empire even come from? Well, after the fall of the Mauryan Empire, which was another great one, North India was pretty chaotic for about 500 years. It was just a patchwork of small, competing kingdoms. And it was out of all that disunity that the Guptas began their rise to power. The foundation was really laid by just a few key people. Sri Gupta is the guy who started it all, but it was his grandson, Chandragupta I, who really got the empire-building project going. He used a mix of strategic conquests and smart alliances, like his marriage into the powerful Lichavi clan, which was a huge deal and gave him a ton of legitimacy. But it was his son who was going to take that foundation and build a real superpower. And that brings us to Samudragupta. This guy was a military genius. His campaigns are legendary, and we know about them from this ancient pillar in Allahabad. He marched north, defeating the Naga kings, and then just swept south, conquering a dozen rulers. But he was also really smart. Instead of kicking out all the southern rulers, he made them his vassals. Basically, they could keep their thrones as long as they paid him tribute and stayed loyal. It's no wonder historians call him the Napoleon of India. So Samudragupta laid the military groundwork. It was his son, Chandragupta II, who would build on that to bring the empire to its absolute peak. This guy was also known as Vikramaditya, which means son of prowess, and he totally lived up to the name. His reign was the high point of Gupta power and influence.
Chandragupta II was just as clever a diplomat as he was a warrior. He had this brilliant three-step plan. First, he locked down his base in the north with another marriage alliance, this time with the Nagas. Second, he made sure his southern border was safe by marrying his own daughter into the powerful Vakataka dynasty. And with his borders totally secure, he could finally focus all his energy on his biggest rival, the Shakas out in the west.
And wow, did that strategy pay off. By crushing the Shakas, Chandragupta II didn't just get rid of an enemy, he basically unlocked a treasure chest. He gained control over these crucial territories, like Gujarat and Malwa, and that meant he now controlled the busy western seaports. This gave the Guptas a direct line to the super profitable sea trade with the Roman Empire, which flooded their treasury with wealth and turned Ujjain into a glorious second capital.
So what happens when you have peace, stability, and a whole lot of money? You get an explosion of genius. This period of incredible wealth is what really sealed the deal on that golden age reputation. It was a time of just mind-blowing innovation in pretty much every field you can imagine. Let's start with a number that literally changed the entire world: 0. The concept of 0 as an actual number was a revolutionary idea developed during this time, most famously by the astronomer Aryabhata. But get this, that's not all he figured out. Centuries before Copernicus, Aryabhata suggested that the Earth spins on its own axis and revolves around the sun. I mean, just think about that for a second. Absolutely incredible for the 5th century. And the genius wasn't just in math. Over in medicine, they were doing things we think of as totally modern. There's this medical text, the Sushruta Samhita, that describes incredibly complex surgeries, like removing cataracts and even performing plastic surgery, specifically nose jobs. Its author, Sushruta, is rightly called the father of plastic surgery. And the arts? Oh, they were on fire. The great epics, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, were put into the final versions we know today. Tons of legal and religious texts were written. The playwright Kalidasa, often called India's Shakespeare, wrote his most famous stuff. Artists created those breathtaking murals you can still see in the Ajanta caves. And the whole idea of building freestanding stone temples for the gods, that started here. It was a true cultural renaissance. But you know how these stories go. No golden age lasts forever.
beneath that shimmering surface of amazing achievements, there were some deep, deep problems. And on the horizon, a new threat was gathering that would end up shattering the empire's peace and prosperity.
That threat came from Central Asia. We're talking about the Huns. Their invasions started to hit hard near the end of Kumaragupta's reign and just got worse under his successor Skandagupta. Now, Skandagupta fought them off heroically, but the constant war was like a slow bleed, draining the empire's money and its military strength. Trade routes were cut off and the economy started to stumble.
Skandagupta was really the last of the great Gupta emperors. The rulers who came after him were just not up to the task. They couldn't handle the problems inside the empire or the constant pressure from the outside. The once mighty empire just crumbled, and by the year 550, it was all over.
And here's the most crucial point. The gold of this golden age did not shine for everybody, not by a long shot. A Chinese traveler named Fa Hien, who visited at the time, wrote about a much darker side of things. Society was built on a really rigid caste system. The horrible practice of untouchability was a thing, and the status of women got a lot worse. They were often denied an education, and terrible customs like sati, where a widow was expected to die on her husband's funeral pyre, were happening.
So, all of this brings us right back to our original question. When you have this full picture, breathtaking achievements on one hand and deep social problems on the other, can you still call the Gupta period a golden age? Well, like most of history, it's complicated.
Let's be perfectly clear. There is absolutely no denying the massive contributions of this era. The intellectual and cultural achievements were just staggering. The breakthroughs they made in math, medicine, and art had a huge, lasting impact, not just on India, but on the entire world.
But at the very same time, we have to acknowledge that the prosperity and the freedoms of this era were not shared by everyone. For huge parts of the population, especially people in lower castes and women, life was anything but golden. It was a time of incredible progress that was built on a foundation of deep, deep inequality.
So, in the end, that label, Golden Age, it kind of forces us to ask a different question. What do we value most when we look back at history? Do we judge a time by its most brilliant accomplishments, or by how it treated its most vulnerable people? The answer, I think, says a lot more about us and our own values than it does about the Guptas.